It started with a letter. Not a text, not an email, just an old-fashioned, handwritten letter. The kind that makes your heart race when it lands in your mailbox, especially when you weren't expecting anything at all. I've never been one for surprises, but I could feel it in the pit of my stomach the moment I saw the envelope. It was thick, creased at the edges, and had no return address. But the worst part? It was addressed to me, but my wife's handwriting was on the front. Not her usual neat cursive, but messy, hurried, like someone trying to write down something important before they ran out of time. I almost threw it away. I almost just said, "Forget it, it's probably some junk she's dealing with," and moved on with my day. But something stopped me. That's when everything shifted. I opened the envelope slowly, almost as if I was expecting something to leap out at me. Inside was just a single sheet of paper, folded in half. I unfolded it and stared at the words for what felt like an eternity. "I don't love you anymore. I've made a choice, and it's not you. Don't try to find me." I didn't know what to think. I read the words again, then a third time. But they didn't change. They were still the same cold, final declaration. No explanation. No reasoning. Just, goodbye. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had no idea how to react. All I could do was sit there, staring at the paper. I wanted to scream, to throw the letter across the room. But instead, I did nothing. I just sat there numb. I glanced over at my wife, Sarah, who was sitting on the couch across from me, absorbed in her phone, oblivious to the storm brewing in the air. I tried to hold back the wave of panic that was crashing through me, tried to calm myself down enough to figure out what had just happened. Was it a joke? A prank? No, it didn't feel like that. I could see in the way she held herself, in the way she wouldn't meet my eyes lately, that something had been changing. But I never thought it would come to this. I had no idea how deep the rift had grown between us. Before I could stop myself, I stood up, my legs feeling like they might give way under me. I walked over to where Sarah was sitting, still not looking up, and dropped the letter in her lap. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked up at me, eyes wide and confused. For a second, I thought I saw something, guilt, fear. But before I could process it, she quickly shoved the letter away, her face pale. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice tight. I wasn't sure if she was asking out of concern or something else entirely. I didn't know how to explain how everything had just crumbled. "Sarah," I started, but I couldn't finish. I had so many questions, but the words caught in my throat. Her response wasn't what I expected. "It's not what you think," she whispered, almost to herself. I stared at her, trying to read the look in her eyes, but all I could see was the same uncertainty that had been plaguing me for weeks. The same feeling I had every time I tried to get close to her, like she was slipping further away, like she was hiding something from me. I tried to speak again, but I could barely find the words. "Then tell me what it is. Tell me what's going on." But Sarah didn't respond. She just stood up and walked out of the room without saying another word. I stood there, holding the letter in my hand, unable to move. I didn't know if it was the shock or the fear or the sudden realization that my whole world had just turned upside down, but in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I stood frozen in the living room, the letter still clutched tightly in my hand. I couldn't tell if the silence that had settled around me was suffocating or somehow liberating. Sarah had walked away without a word, without any explanation. Her retreat only seemed to confirm the sinking feeling in my stomach. She had made her decision. But what was her choice? And why the secrecy? I glanced down at the letter again, as if hoping it would somehow offer me more clarity. It didn't. The words were still harsh, still ringing in my ears. "I don't love you anymore." The sentence felt like it was echoing off the walls of my mind, louder and louder. The reality of it was impossible to ignore, but I couldn't comprehend it. How could she not love me? How could she just give up after everything we had built together? My mind raced through every moment of our marriage. The good times, the bad times, the late-night conversations, and early morning coffee runs. I thought about the way we used to laugh together, the way we'd hold each other when things got tough. But now, all of that seemed like it belonged to someone else, like a dream I had no access to anymore. I could hear Sarah moving around upstairs, the soft sounds of footsteps as she went from room to room. But she wasn't coming back down. She was avoiding me. I knew it, and she knew it. I didn't understand why, but I knew she had been avoiding me for a while. I just hadn't been able to admit it. I had made excuses. "It's just work stress. She's been tired lately. We've been busy with the kids. But now, standing in the silence of the house, it all felt like lies I had been telling myself. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I couldn't just sit here and let this fester. I had to confront her, to understand why she had chosen to destroy everything without even explaining herself. I walked upstairs, the house creaking under my weight as if it, too, was unsure of what was about to unfold. I reached our bedroom door, but I paused for a moment, trying to prepare myself for whatever was behind it. I wasn't sure what to expect, maybe a tearful apology, maybe a cold denial. I wasn't ready for the truth, but I couldn't walk away from it either. I pushed the door open slowly. There she was, sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to me. She was still in her work clothes, her blazer hanging loosely over her shoulders. She didn't turn around when I entered, didn't even acknowledge my presence. It was like I was a ghost to her, a man she no longer recognized. "Emily," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "We need to talk." She didn't move at first. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she sighed and stood up. She finally turned to face me, but there was no warmth in her eyes. No trace of the woman I had known. "I'm sorry, Frank," she said, her voice distant. "I didn't want it to end this way." "Then why did you do it?" I demanded, the anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. "Why did you write that letter? Why didn't you just talk to me instead of leaving me in the dark like this?" She looked away, her lips trembling. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but the tears never came. Instead, she just looked exhausted, like she had given up. She took a deep breath and spoke, her words soft but firm. "There's someone else." The words hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, my breath catching in my throat. "What do you mean?" I asked, the words barely forming. "Who?" I didn't want to hurt you, Frank. I thought I could keep it from you, but I can't hide it anymore. I've been seeing someone else. For a while now." The silence that followed was deafening. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I had heard the rumors, of course. Friends had hinted at things here and there, but I never thought it would be true. Never thought it could be true. I had always thought we were stronger than that. "Who is he?" I managed to ask, barely able to get the words out. She hesitated, like she was trying to decide whether or not to tell me. But I knew. I knew that she had already made up her mind, and that this was just the painful aftermath. "He's someone from work," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for it to happen, but I've fallen for him, Frank." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. She had fallen for him. All this time, while I had been going through the motions, believing everything was fine, she had been in someone else's arms. I looked at her, trying to make sense of it all. I wanted to scream, to shout, to demand every little detail. But what good would it do? Nothing would change. She had made her choice. She had already walked away. "You can leave now," she said, her voice quieter than ever, like she was trying to make it easier for me. "I'll pack up my things and go." "Is this really how you want to end it?" I asked, my voice low and bitter. "Just like this? No fight, no explanation? You're just walking away from everything we've built?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. "I loved you, Emily," I said, my voice breaking. "And I still do. But I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending." She nodded, but her eyes didn't meet mine. They were focused on the floor, as if she couldn't bear to look at me, to face what she had done. I turned around and walked out of the room, leaving her behind. I didn't look back. I left the house that night. It wasn't a planned decision, but I couldn't stay there. Not with the echo of her confession still hanging in the air, suffocating me. I grabbed my keys, slammed the door behind me, and drove aimlessly through the streets. My mind was a whirlwind, each thought colliding with the next, each memory of Emily a shattered piece of glass cutting deep into my chest. I didn't know where I was going or what I hoped to find, but I had to be away from her, from the house, from everything that had once been my life. Hours passed, but I couldn't outrun the storm raging inside me. I was furious, heartbroken, confused. I couldn't fathom what had just happened. I couldn't comprehend how the woman I had loved for so long, my wife, my partner, could betray me so completely. I didn't deserve this. I didn't deserve her lies. But most of all, I didn't deserve to be kept in the dark. By the time I ended up in front of a small diner on the edge of town, the night was deep, the streets empty. The neon lights of the diner flickered weakly in the darkness, but they were enough to pull me in. I parked my car, stepped out into the cold, and made my way to the door. I needed something, anything, to numb the ache inside me. I needed to forget, even if just for a few hours. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, and the warm scent of coffee filled the air. The diner was practically empty, save for a lone waitress behind the counter. She barely looked up as I sat down at the booth, but I didn't care. I wasn't looking for conversation. I just wanted to escape the chaos of my mind. The waitress brought me a cup of coffee without asking, and I took a sip, feeling the bitter warmth slide down my throat. It helped, but not much. As I sat there, staring at the remnants of my life swirling in the black liquid, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, but something told me it was Sarah. I pulled it out and saw her name flash across the screen. I should have ignored it. I knew that, but I didn't. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment before I answered. Frank. Her voice was shaky, her breath uneven. We need to talk. I felt a cold rush of dread flood through me. I didn't want to talk to her. Not right now. Not when everything in me was telling me to walk away, to never look back. But I couldn't hang up. There was still a part of me that needed to understand. Needed to hear it from her. About what? I asked, my voice flat. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I'm sorry, she whispered, and I could hear the tears in her voice. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't want to hurt you. The words stung, but I didn't let them show. You've already hurt me, Sarah. You've already torn everything apart. I didn't know how to tell you, she continued, her voice barely audible now. I didn't know how to explain. Him. That word, that one word, sliced through me like a blade. The man she had been seeing. The man who had come between us. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. Who is he? I demanded. The question slipped out before I could stop it, but I needed to know. I had to know. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence was louder than any explanation she could give me. I should have told you sooner, she said finally, her voice trembling. But I couldn't find the words. I was done. I had heard enough. I couldn't listen to her apologies anymore. They meant nothing now. She had already made her choice. And that choice wasn't me. You can't fix this, Sarah, I said, my voice colder than I intended. You don't get to come back now and pretend everything's okay. You've already crossed a line that I can't come back from. She was silent for a moment, and I could hear the raw pain in her breath. She knew it was true. There was nothing left to say. I never wanted this to happen, she said softly. But I can't undo what I've done. I don't expect you to forgive me. I won't, I replied. The words felt final, like a door slamming shut. And then I hung up. The phone felt heavy in my hand, like an anchor I couldn't shake loose. I stared at it for a long time, wondering how everything had unraveled so quickly. One moment, I was a man in a marriage I thought was solid. The next, I was a man lost in a world I didn't recognize. The waitress glanced over at me, probably noticing the tension in the air, but I didn't care. I finished my coffee, paid the bill, and left the diner. The night had never felt so empty, and as I walked back to my car, I realized something. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back to the life I had before. I couldn't. The drive back home felt endless. The roads blurred in front of me, and the weight of everything I had just heard, the words, the apology, the confession, sat heavy on my chest. The night air was thick, almost suffocating, and I could feel every second stretching into an eternity. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to face her, but I knew I had to. It was inevitable. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always did, quiet, unassuming, and locked in a false sense of security. The lights inside were dim, casting long shadows in the windows. I sat in the car for a moment, trying to gather the strength to go inside. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. A tearful reunion? A passionate argument? What was I supposed to say to her now that the truth was out? I opened the door and stepped inside, the house eerily still. There was no sign of Emily. I knew she must be upstairs, probably sitting in our bedroom, waiting for me to come to her, to listen, to understand. But I wasn't sure I could anymore. I wasn't sure I even wanted to. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. My heart beat loudly in my ears as I reached the top of the stairs and turned the corner to our room. The door was slightly ajar, the faint sound of her breathing coming from inside. She was waiting for me. I pushed the door open. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of compassion for her. But then the anger came back, crashing into me like a tidal wave. How could she do this to us? To our family? Frank, she said, her voice trembling. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe me. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took a step into the room, letting the door close softly behind me. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what was left to say. The damage was done. You didn't want to hurt me? I asked, my voice hoarse. Is that what this is? You thought you could keep me in the dark and it wouldn't hurt me? You've been lying to me for months, Emily. And now, you expect me to just forgive you? She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. No, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to understand that I never wanted this. I was lost. I was looking for something I didn't know I needed. I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to overtake me. Looking for what? I asked, barely able to contain my rage. What could you possibly need that I wasn't giving you? What's so special about him? She flinched at the mention of him, the man who had somehow come between us. The man who had stolen her heart, or whatever was left of it. I don't know, she whispered, her voice breaking. It wasn't about him. It was about me. I felt empty. I didn't know how to fill that void. I didn't know how to tell you that I was falling apart. The words hit me like a slap to the face. I couldn't breathe. So, you thought cheating was the answer? I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. You thought that going behind my back, destroying everything we've built, was going to make you feel better? I was scared, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know how to fix myself, Frank. I didn't know how to fix us. And then, he was there. He made me feel seen, made me feel wanted. But that doesn't change the fact that I betrayed you. I know that. I know I've destroyed everything. I stood there in silence, letting her words sink in. The pain, the betrayal, it was all too much to process in that moment. I had no answers, no way to fix what was broken. How could I? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. You should have talked to me, Emily. You should have told me how you felt. We could have worked through this together. But instead, you chose him. I know, and I'm so sorry. But I don't know what else to say. I can't take back what I've done. I can't undo it. She stood up then, walking towards me with hesitant steps, her eyes pleading for some kind of understanding. Please, Frank, don't let this be the end. I wanted to scream, to shout, to tell her everything I was feeling. But all I could do was stand there, looking at the woman I had once loved, now nothing more than a stranger to me. Do you still love him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked away, and in that brief moment of hesitation, I knew the answer. I didn't need her to say it. It was in the way she avoided my eyes, the way she couldn't even bring herself to speak his name. I'm sorry, she said again, the words falling flat between us. But I can't take back what I've done. And I know you can't forgive me. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to say. So, I didn't say anything at all. I turned around and walked out of the room, leaving her behind. I needed space. I needed time. But most of all, I needed to figure out what came next. The days that followed felt like I was living in a fog, everything around me moving in slow motion, yet the noise inside my head never stopped. Each morning, I would wake up in our bed, the empty space beside me a constant reminder of what had happened, what was happening. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape her. Every room, every corner of the house felt like it was closing in on me. I knew what I had to do, but making the decision was far harder than I could have imagined. I had hoped that things might somehow go back to normal, that maybe Sarah would wake up, realize the mess she had made, and beg me to forgive her. But that was a fantasy. The truth was, I couldn't just go back to pretending everything was fine. I couldn't live in a house full of lies. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. That night, after days of silent tension, I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. Sarah had been trying to talk to me, sending me messages, trying to reach out, but I had ignored her. I didn't want to hear her apologies anymore. I didn't want to hear about how sorry she was. Sorry wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't going to fix what she had done. I sat in the living room, the dim light from the street lamps outside casting shadows across the room. It felt like everything in this house was fading. My thoughts were a blur of anger, hurt, confusion. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I couldn't keep living like this. When Sarah came downstairs, she looked at me for a moment, as if waiting for me to speak first. Her eyes were red, her face pale. I could see the exhaustion in her posture, the way she held herself like she was waiting for me to break. She took a step toward me, but I held up my hand, stopping her. "I don't want to hear it," I said, my voice cold and detached. "I don't want more apologies, more excuses. You've already said everything you needed to say." She opened her mouth, but I held up my hand again, this time with more force. "I've had time to think about it, Sarah. A lot of time, and I've made a decision." She stood still, her face a mixture of hope and fear, her eyes searching mine for any hint of what I was about to say. "I'm leaving." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. I wasn't expecting the reaction I got. Her face fell, and for a moment, she looked almost relieved. But then the panic set in, her hands trembling as she stepped closer to me. "No, Frank, please, we can fix this. I swear, I can't undo what happened, but I'll do anything to make it right. Please, don't leave." I stood up then, walking past her, heading toward the door. "You should have thought of that before. You made your choice, Emily. And now, I'm making mine." I grabbed my coat and keys, turning back one last time to look at her. "I don't know who you are anymore, and I don't know how to fix that." I walked out the door and into the cold night, the weight of everything settling on my shoulders. The first step was always the hardest, but now that I had made it, I knew I couldn't go back. There was no turning around, no pretending it wasn't happening. I drove away without a destination in mind. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay. I needed to get away from it all. The house, the memories, the lies. I had to escape the life I had built with Sarah, even if just for a while. I thought about calling my brother, telling him everything, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet. I needed time. I needed space. Hours passed before I ended up in a small town about an hour away. The streets were quiet, the buildings dimly lit. I parked the car and sat for a while, just staring at the windshield. The weight of the decision I had made was starting to settle in. I was alone now, truly alone, and it scared me. But it was better than living a lie. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if I would ever get the answers I needed. But I knew I had to find a way to move forward. For my own sake. For my sanity. I couldn't stay in a marriage that wasn't real anymore. I checked into a small motel and sat on the bed, staring at the wall. My mind was still racing, trying to make sense of everything. Could I forgive her? Could I ever look at her the same way again? Or had the betrayal shattered everything? In the end, it didn't matter. I had made my decision, and there was no going back. I spent the next few days in the motel, drifting in and out of sleep, my mind constantly replaying the moments leading up to my departure from the house. I couldn't escape the image of Emily's face, her desperate plea for me to stay, her eyes full of guilt and regret. I thought I would feel relief after leaving her, but instead, it was just emptiness. I hadn't expected it to hurt this much. I hadn't expected to feel so lost. The days blurred together. I spent most of my time walking the streets of the small town, trying to clear my mind, but it wasn't working. I couldn't shake the questions that kept spiraling in my head. What now? Was this the end? Was there any possibility of saving my marriage? Or had Emily's betrayal been the final nail in the coffin? I didn't know what I was hoping for when I picked up my phone, but I knew it was time to face the inevitable. The call came late one evening, just as I was about to drift off to sleep. The name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. It was Sarah. I almost didn't answer. I had made it clear I needed space, that I wasn't ready to hear her voice, but part of me couldn't help it. I needed closure. I needed to know if there was anything left worth salvaging. So, I swiped the screen and brought the phone to my ear, bracing myself for whatever was about to come. "Frank." Her voice was shaky, like she had been crying. "I need to see you." My chest tightened at her words. "Sarah, why? What could we possibly have to talk about? I know I've hurt you, and I know I don't deserve another chance. But please, just let me explain. I need to see you, face to face. I have something to show you," she said, her voice quiet but filled with urgency. I didn't know what she could possibly have to show me. What could she possibly say that would change anything? But despite myself, I felt a flicker of curiosity. I couldn't just ignore her forever. Maybe this was the moment where I'd finally get the answers I was looking for. Or maybe it was just another one of her desperate attempts to make things right. "I'm not coming back to the house," I said flatly. "I've already made my decision, Sarah. I can't keep going in circles with you." "Please, Frank," she begged. and this time I could hear the raw emotion in her voice. This isn't about us, not anymore. I need you to listen to me. Just come to the park. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Please, I need to show you something. I hesitated for a long moment. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to face her again. But something in her voice told me she wasn't going to let this go. And maybe, just maybe, there was something I needed to hear. I'll be there, I said, before hanging up without another word. The next morning, I stood in the park, my hands shoved deep in my jacket pockets, waiting for her. The air was crisp, the sky a dull gray, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I didn't know what I expected, but I had no doubt that whatever she had to say would change everything. When Sarah finally appeared, she looked different. Not the version of her I had known, the woman who had stood by my side through thick and thin, but someone who seemed smaller, lost. She approached cautiously, her gaze never quite meeting mine. I didn't think you'd actually come, she said softly, her voice distant, like she was still unsure of what this moment meant. I came, I replied. Now, what is it that you want to show me? She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, thick with papers. She handed it to me without a word. I took it, my curiosity piqued. As I opened the folder, my eyes scanned the first page. It was a letter from a lawyer. The text was dense and filled with legal jargon, but the title at the top caught my attention, Divorce Petition. I looked up at her, my heart pounding. Is this what I think it is? She nodded, her expression unreadable. I filed for divorce, Frank. I know it's not what you wanted. Hell, it's not even what I wanted, but I had to do it. I had to let go. I need to move on. I felt the world tilt beneath me. Divorce? After everything we'd been through? After everything she had promised me? Why now? I asked, my voice cracking. Why this? Why not a conversation? A chance to fix things, like we've always done? She shook her head, the tears in her eyes threatening to spill over. I thought I could fix it, Frank. I really did. But I was so lost, and I hurt you in ways I can't even take back. This is me trying to take responsibility for what I've done. I stared at her, unable to speak. The pain in my chest was unbearable. I wanted to scream at her, ask her how she could do this to us, but I couldn't find the words. The silence stretched between us like a chasm that could never be bridged. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never wanted to destroy everything we had, but I can't pretend anymore. I looked at the divorce petition in my hands, the reality of it sinking in. So this is it. You're just walking away? I'm not walking away from everything, Frank, she said, her voice soft. But I can't stay in a marriage that isn't real. I can't keep pretending I'm someone I'm not. And I know you can't keep living this way, either. I didn't know what to say to that. She was right. We couldn't keep pretending. We were both too broken, too far gone. But that didn't make it any easier. I folded the papers and handed them back to her. The weight of the decision too much to bear. I can't sign these right now, I said, my voice distant. I don't know what I'm doing, Sarah. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. But I can't do this today. She nodded, tears now freely flowing down her face. I understand. But know this, Frank, I never wanted to hurt you. I loved you. I still do, in a way. But we need to move on. We need to let go. As she turned and walked away, I stood there, frozen, not knowing if I was walking away from the past or if the past was walking away from me. I didn't know how to feel after Sarah left. My hands were still trembling from holding that damn divorce petition, the weight of it sinking in with every step I took back to my car. I had gone there to get answers, but instead, I found myself at a crossroads I wasn't ready for. I hadn't even considered the possibility that she would file for divorce, much less show up with the papers in her hands like it was the most normal thing in the world. As I drove back to the motel, the city lights blurred into streaks against the darkening sky. My mind was a jumble of thoughts. The anger was still there, but now it was mixed with confusion and disbelief. Was this really happening? Had I really reached the point where this was the only way out? I had asked for answers, but I didn't expect this. It was like she was trying to put a neat bow on something that could never be fixed. When I got back to my room, I threw my keys on the desk and collapsed onto the bed. The flickering neon from the street sign outside cast an eerie glow across the room. I sat there for a while, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the images of Sarah and her apology. The tears in her eyes. The way she had broken down in front of me, confessing everything she had done. It should have been enough for me to forgive her, to walk back into our old life and rebuild. But it wasn't. How could it be? What had she expected me to do? How could I ever look at her the same way again? How could I ever trust her? But as the night dragged on, I found myself thinking about something else. Something that gnawed at the back of my mind. The man she had been seeing. She hadn't said much about him. In fact, she barely mentioned him at all. I had no idea who he was, but I knew one thing. He had been the catalyst for everything. He was the reason we were here. I couldn't let it go. The need to know who he was, why he had come into our lives, it was eating at me. I had to find out. Not just for the sake of my sanity, but because I couldn't stand the idea of him being out there, knowing everything about my wife while I was left in the dark. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of determination. I wasn't going to let this mystery consume me. I needed answers. I called in sick to work and spent the next few hours trying to track down any information I could about the man Emily had been seeing. It wasn't easy. She had kept things quiet, hidden away. But eventually, after making a few calls and digging through some old messages, I found a name, Alex Grant. He was an architect, a colleague of hers from the firm she had been working with for the past few years. I wasn't surprised. It was always someone close to her, always someone she could trust. But still, the realization that he was someone I might have met, someone who had been in my life without me knowing, sent a wave of nausea through me. I couldn't understand how she could do this, how she could betray me with someone she worked with, someone who was always just a few steps away from me. I had to confront him. I found out where Alex lived. It wasn't far from the city, just a short drive away. The thought of facing him made my blood boil. But it had to be done. I had to know what he had to say for himself. Why he thought he could come into my life and steal my wife. I drove to his place, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. When I reached the building, I parked across the street and sat for a moment, taking in the view of the apartment complex. I could feel my heart racing, my chest tight with anger. Part of me wanted to turn around, to just go back to my room and forget everything. But I couldn't. Not now. Not when the answers were so close. I got out of the car and made my way to the front door. My steps were heavy, each one pounding against the pavement like a drumbeat in my ears. I didn't know what I was going to say when he opened the door. What could I possibly say to a man who had taken everything from me? I rang the doorbell, and after what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open. A man in his mid-30s appeared. He was tall, with short, dark hair, and a look of confusion on his face when he saw me standing there. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm, almost casual. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice sharp. "About Emily." His face faltered for just a second, but he quickly regained his composure. "Emily," he repeated, as if he didn't already know where this was going. "Yeah, Emily. My wife," I said, stepping forward, not caring any more about the distance between us. "You think you can just come into my life and take what's mine?" He didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said quietly. "We need to talk." I wasn't expecting this. I thought he'd deny everything, maybe even try to lie his way out of it. But he didn't. There was no hesitation, no avoidance. He knew what he had done. He knew what was at stake. "I'm not here for a fight," I said, my voice steady now. "I just want the truth. All of it." Alex nodded and led me into the living room, sitting down across from me. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The silence was thick, like we were both waiting for the other to make the first move. Finally, he spoke. "I never wanted to hurt you, Frank," he said quietly. "I never planned for this to happen. But I'm not sorry for what happened between me and Emily." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I could feel my chest tighten, the anger threatening to boil over, but I kept my cool. I had to. I needed the truth. The whole truth. "Why her?" I asked, my voice low. "Why did you think it was okay to do this? To tear my life apart?" Alex leaned back in his chair, his eyes searching the floor for a moment before he finally met my gaze. "Because she needed someone, Frank. She was lost. And I was there. I didn't set out to hurt you, but I couldn't help her. I couldn't let her go without at least trying." I wanted to scream at him, to throw something, but instead, I just sat there, feeling my world slip through my fingers. He had a point. She had needed someone, and she had chosen him. I was just the man she was stuck with. I sat there for a long time, just staring at Alex, the weight of his words sinking in. There was nothing more to say. The betrayal was clear, and there was no point in going back to fix what had been broken. But something inside me, Something deeper than the hurt, than the anger, told me that I needed to let go. I had been holding on to the past, trying to fix something that was beyond repair. But I couldn't keep living like this. Not in the past, not with the ghosts of what could have been. I stood up slowly, the air around me feeling suddenly lighter. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "You didn't break me. She didn't break me. I'm the only one who can do that, and I'm not going to." Alex didn't say anything. He just nodded. I couldn't hate him. Not anymore. He was just as lost as I had been. He had been looking for answers, too. And for a brief moment, our pain had intersected. But that moment was over. I left his apartment with a sense of finality. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was starting to breathe again. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long began to lift, and I realized I had been holding on to something that was already gone. My marriage, my past, it was all in the rearview mirror. It was time to stop looking back. The next few weeks were a blur. I moved out of the motel and found a small apartment in a quieter part of town. The change in scenery helped. It was like I was starting over, building something new from the ground up. I spent a lot of time by myself, reflecting on everything that had happened, but also focusing on what I wanted my future to look like. I stopped answering Sarah's calls. She had tried reaching out a few more times, but I knew now that I needed distance, not closure. The closure would come when I was ready, when I had healed. It wasn't easy. There were days when I would wake up and feel the sharp sting of loneliness, the emptiness that came with the silence of a house that wasn't mine anymore. But those days were becoming fewer. Slowly, I started making new connections. I reconnected with old friends. I even joined a local group for people who were going through divorces. It felt strange at first, but the people I met there understood me in ways no one else could. And then one day, as I was leaving a coffee shop after meeting with a friend, I bumped into someone new. Her name was Sophie. She had a warm smile, and the way she looked at me made me feel like I was seen again, not just as a man who had been betrayed, but as someone worthy of affection. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't even a spark, but there was something there. A connection, a moment of human understanding that told me I wasn't done. I wasn't broken. I was just beginning. Sophie and I exchanged numbers, and we started seeing each other more often. It wasn't serious at first, just casual hangouts and coffee dates. But with each one, I felt more alive. I was learning to laugh again, to enjoy life without the weight of what had happened to me. Slowly, I was starting to trust again. Slowly, I was beginning to believe that I deserved happiness. It wasn't perfect. Nothing in life is. But I wasn't chasing perfection anymore. I wasn't looking for some idealized version of a relationship. I was looking for peace. And peace, I realized, came from within. As for Sarah, I still think about her sometimes. I still carry the pain of what she did to me, but I've learned to live with it. It doesn't define me anymore. I'm not the man I was when I was with her. I'm not the man who allowed himself to be lost in someone else's mistakes. I'm someone new, someone stronger. And the best part? I'm still learning who that person is every single day.